Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we have been seeing America change very slowly over time. Many people are now realizing things are very different. The way the U.S. government acts, the way most of the politicians act, the way the laws are, the rule of law has completely changed. There's one set of rules for the elite. There's another set of rules for the serfs. So what we're seeing right now is a change in America. And this change is not for the good. Because what is happening right now in America is the U.S. government central bankers, they have been prepping the U.S. for this change. And people are thinking to themselves, well, what do you mean this change? Well, think about where we're headed right now. We're headed into a period of time where the United States government central bankers are looking to push war because the entire economic system is coming down. They've been pushing for many years to remove weapons from the people because they know a population that do not have weapons, they can't defend themselves. This is proven over time in many, many different countries. They've been also creating educational systems called Common Core in the United States, where they pushed the Common Core educational system on the states by first introducing grants and money to the states. And there were preconditions. If you accept the federal money, you must then accept Common Core. And of course the state said, well, if it's Common Core, of course we'll accept that. It sounds great. Well, of course we know what the U.S. government does. Any bill or any program they create, they pick out a really great title to make it sound like it's working for the people. The Affordable Care Act. Does it really seem that affordable anymore? The Patriot Act. Is it really for the patriots? No. When you hear these things, it's always the opposite of what they really are. And this Common Core is to train and educate our next generation to be good citizens and to do whatever the government wants. That's why in Common Core, they are trying to convince the young that the rights are privileges. They rewrote a lot of the rights in the way the government wants to explain them. And we can see right now that America is going to change because after the war, these central bankers, these elite, the globalists, whatever you like to call them, they do believe that they're going to restart this entire system all over. And they rather get rid of all these rights and the Constitution. It's really a big problem for them because they can't control the people the way they want. They can't have people having rights. That's why the Founding Fathers decided to do this, because they realized without this, the people are doomed. So we're going to be going through this incredible change in America unless it's stopped. And we can see by what the central bankers are doing right now, they've been preparing and prepping for this situation for quite a while. Because they knew eventually that this economic system would die. They knew eventually that they would push war. And they knew eventually, when all is said and done, America would have to adapt to a new set of rules. And this is what they've been getting the entire country ready for. And if we don't want this to happen, we as a people, once again, need to come together and fight for the country that we once knew of. Because when we listen to our founding fathers, we read their writings, we know that what they gave us was only going to last for a certain period of time, and we were going to have to fight for what they set up once again. And we're coming to that point. And we know that the powers at be, the federal government, they've been infiltrating the local police departments, giving them military equipment, giving them federal grants, federal money. This way they have to report back to the federal government. Basically, they've been federalized. And we can see right now that they will use these local forces to lock down America. Because you have to remember, there was a House bill called 1328, and it went into effect August 1st. And the original piece of legislation was to ensure police obtained a search warrant to use a drone to gather criminal evidence. However, when a lobbyist with a police ties was allowed to amend the bill, it was rewritten to specify that drones could carry anything except weapons capable of lethal force until the year 2017, when the police will be able to fly weaponized drones. So, the reason why the federal government was out there telling individuals they can't fly drones, why you had to get licensed, because they don't want you having the same tools, the same weapons they have. Just like they don't want you to have a weapon. Because, think about it, a drone flying around in the air with a weapon attached to it, very, very dangerous, very effective. And we can see right now that they are prepared and ready to control the population when this system comes down. And they know they're going to have to control the people. They know that once the system comes down, there's going to be many, many angry people. They're hoping to cover this up with war to distract everyone, but we have to see what the timing's going to be. They're trying to do their best to get war started, but again, their plans don't always go as planned. Because look at the Middle East. They thought they were going to have all these countries all lined up with puppet governments by 2008. It didn't happen. Actually, they're losing the countries now. They're going back in to fight the same people. The people who want their countries back. So we see right now we do have a chance. We have a window of opportunity to band together, to come together as a people, and to change things. And we need to go to the root of the problem. And these two candidates that are running right now, it's really meaningless because they're not going to be in control. They're puppets. Yes, one might take orders better than the other from the shadow government, from the elite, from the central bankers. But if you do not cut off the head of the snake, guess what? It won't make a difference. They'll just get rid of the puppet they don't want and put in a puppet they do want. Now, we have noticed that the war drums have been beating louder and louder and louder. The corporate media is even talking about war. They have some op-ed articles, I think in the New York Times and other places, where they're talking about war and how it would be good to have some type of war. And we see many countries are preparing. India just signed an agreement with Russia to get the S-400 missile system supplied to them. We see Russia complete the deal with Iran to receive the rest of the S-300 air defense system. We see out in the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte said, you know something? I've had it. U.S. forces need to leave the country now. And we can see right now that the United States government central bankers, they want the Philippines. It's part of their strategic location to encircle China. And what we're seeing right now is countries now are taking sides, and we're seeing a lot of countries reacting to what is about to happen here. Because we can see the United States right now, they're not going to let up. They might talk peace. They might, point fingers, use propaganda, but they will never give up on their goal to start this war. The system is coming down. We see the U.S. Air Force has the F-16 and KC-135s. They have been deployed back in July to Djibouti, and we can see they are on standby right now because of what is happening in Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Russia. So already the U.S. is increasing the level of readiness to launch planes into different areas when needed. We see Representative Ted Lieu, a former lawyer in the U.S. Air Force, urged Obama to suspend all arms sales to Saudi Arabia because of the war crimes of Saudi Arabia inflicting death on the Yemeni people. And we can see right now that the United States government, central bankers, they don't care about that. Their whole mission is, who cares about the people? Get the puppet government back into the country, regain power. Doesn't matter how many people we have to kill. It makes no difference. If we have to kill hundreds of thousands of them, as long as they learn their lesson never to question the government we put into place, so be it. We know already that the USS Mason, it fired 3 missiles at 3 different radar sites, which belong to the Houthi forces, and they fired Tomahawk cruise missiles. And we know right now that the U.S. government central bankers are going to escalate this because they can see right now that the paid mercenaries from Saudi Arabia, they can't get the job done. Plus, now Congress pushed the JASTA law through. Saudi Arabia is looking at China, looking at Russia, and they might just say, you know something? You're on your own here. And we can see at this point that the United States government, they might say, hey, listen, this is a one-time thing where we fired the missiles. Because what they're doing is they pick these targets, they destroy them, and they see what type of reaction there is. Did it help? Didn't it help? And, of course, most of the time, it doesn't help. So they have to do it again. Then they have to bring in advisors. Then they have to bring in airplanes. Then they have to make a bombing run. And this just continually escalates. This is what's going to happen in Yemen. Now, something very interesting happened in Washington where reporters were asking the State Department, what is the difference between Yemen bombings and Syria bombings? Because think about it. Kerry, the United States government, they're accusing Russia of committing war crimes in Syria. They're saying they're bombing, the infrastructure, marketplaces. They're bombing humanitarian aid, hospitals, whatever they can point their finger at. And then we have Yemen, where we have Saudi Arabia, the proxy forces of the United States government central bankers, where the United States is supplying them weapon. And Saudi Arabia is bombing funerals, weddings, hospitals, schools. The difference is Saudi Arabia is waging war with Yemen. Russia was invited into Syria to get rid of terrorism. And the U.S., of course, condemns the Russian bombing in Syria, but doesn't condemn the bombing in Yemen that have killed thousands upon thousands of civilians. And of course, the U.S. government, they have no answer for this. Because how do you explain to the people that, wait a minute, in Yemen, we need to put our puppet government back? Because otherwise, the petrodollar dies and the central banking system dies with it. How do they explain that? They can't. And this is where the problem comes in. What we're starting to see is a breakdown of all these lies. And people are asking questions. We need a lot more people asking questions, but they're asking questions because things don't make sense anymore. And this is what happens during the end game here. We see Iran has deployed a fleet of warships to the Gulf of Aden. And of course, it coincides with the U.S. cruise missile strike. And Iran is saying, listen, we're just protecting our area right now. And we can see that every single country right now is on edge. The United States, well, they're preparing for a massive aerial campaign in Mosul. They've conducted 10 airstrikes over Mosul last night. And we see that the Iraqi forces, they have about 65,000 Iraqi soldiers in 6 divisions, and they're preparing to battle and to retake the city of Mosul. There's about 10,000 Kurdish fighters that are also expected to join the battle, and 6,000 U.S. troops are there to advise everyone. And we know that the U.S. has more than 6,000 troops there. You have to remember how the whole thing works. The Iraqi government and the U.S. government came to an agreement that they would only keep 4,500 permanent troops inside of Iraq. The rest of the troops that are there, they're called temporary, without an expiration date. So, in reality, the United States government central bankers, they have an upward soldier count of about 10,000 plus soldiers inside of Iraq right now. We see that in Aleppo, the terrorists, the moderate rebels, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Al-Sham, well, they shelled a bus station in Aleppo, and 5 children were killed. We see right now that Russia is agreeing to let the terrorists out of Aleppo. They want the civilians evacuated from this entire area. They're going to give everyone safe passage. Now, of course, if the terrorists leave the area, the United States, well, they lose Aleppo. They're not going to let this happen. This is why the terrorists are continually using the civilians as shields. This is why they're intermingling with the civilians, so it makes it very difficult to bomb the area. Well, it looks like Lavrov is going to get together with John Kerry once again. They're going to try to iron out a peace deal to see if they can stop what is about to happen. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid war, because they realize eventually what's going to happen is the United States is going to do something. It might not look like they actually did it. They'll turn it around and make it look like it's the other side, and they'll have to retaliate, just like in Yemen. They're just, out there with their 2 destroyers off the coast of Yemen, and all of a sudden the Houthis decided to fire 2 missiles, but it just missed the ships because the Aegis system was able to jam them and protect them, and they missed completely. Well, that was a false flag. The Houthis would never fire missiles at the U.S. and invite them in to attack. That's ridiculous. These most likely were fired by the paid mercenaries. They told them to fire in a certain location, make sure you miss the ships, and this will allow the United States to bomb in Yemen. The same thing is going to happen in Syria, because come Friday, tomorrow, we see Obama is going to make a decision on what to do in Syria. And in one case, he can just say, okay, let's leave Syria. We're done here. Just let the petrodollar collapse. We are done. I don't think that's going to happen. The other alternative is to have the U.S. military use airstrikes on the Syrian military, hit their munition depots, radar, anti-aircraft bases. This is going to be a problem. Russia has jamming technology. They have the S-300, S-400 missile systems in there. And we know if the U.S. attempts to fly, and it looks like they're going to be making a bombing run and hit these areas, we know Syria most likely is going to fire one of these S-300 missile air defense system missiles, and it's going to hit a U.S. plane. And at that point, we are going to have war. General Joseph Dunfern warned that, yes, this would most likely lead to war if we go down this path. Another alternative is to provide the terrorist groups, or I should say, they're calling them the vetted rebels, with more sophisticated weapons, which will most likely lead to war anyhow. But the U.S. can say, listen, we didn't shoot down the Russian plane. We didn't shoot down the Syrian plane. It was the moderate rebels that did that. So you can't have war with the United States. But Russia is going to see this as very different. Syria is going to see this as very different. And at that point, Russia and Syria will fire upon the moderate rebels. And this will lead to war. And we can see that the United States government central bankers, they're sending Russia a message, because in Damascus, the Russian embassy was shelled for 2 hours on Wednesday. Damaged the building, the compound, the adjacent buildings, but the staff, they were not hurt. And now we hear the Royal Air Force, they have ordered their pilots to shoot down hostile Russian jets over Syria. And this is where it gets a little sticky here. We understand if pilots are fired upon, they can fire back. That makes sense. Will Russia fire upon the jets from the UK? Most likely not. What would be the reason? What would be the motive? They know where it would lead, so they're not going to do this. But the other statement from the UK, they said, if you believe that the Russian jet is going to be firing on you, you need to fire back. Well, this is a very serious situation here, because what are the qualifiers for this? Oh, look, there's a Russian jet. I'm flying pretty close to it. It looks like it's going to get ready to fire at me. I better fire before they even do anything. Boom, we have World War III. So we're at a point right now, a flashpoint, where we have many things happening at once. And everything that we talked about, where all these military assets, these military troops moving into position, getting ready for World War III, we can see we're here already. It's just a matter of time before something happens. Why are we here? Because the entire economic system is falling apart. This is all interconnected. It's not one without the other. The entire economy is based on the petrodollar system. We're in the Middle East to keep control of the petrodollar system. When I say we, talking about the U.S. government central bankers, it's their system. It's what they created. Made them a lot of money. They were able to control the world through this. And they're losing this. If the petrodollar system goes, the entire dollar system collapses, which means the economies around the world all collapse at the same time. This is why everything is interconnected. This is why we're in the Middle East. This is why the U.S. government central bankers are having regime change. Think about how many people they have killed to keep their system operational. How many women, children, men have died for their paper and ink system. And they're getting ready to kill a lot more with war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.